Hello everybody, and welcome to my deck tech for my Gretchen Titchwillow cPDH deck. This is a Simic combo deck, looking to create infinite colored mana for Simic, and activate our commander to draw our deck, and then find a win condition from there. Whenever we're not doing our combo, this is just a generic Simic good stuff value deck, with a card advantage engine in the command zone, as well as a piece of ramp. So the most important thing to understand about this deck is going to be your combo lines. In terms of gameplay, this plays somewhat similar to Thrasios in cEDH if you're familiar with that deck. Although we do get a special niche that Thrasios does not have, thanks to Mystic Sanctuary. Now, because our commander allows us to put a land from our hand into play whenever we activate her, we can use cards like Tragic Lesson, Deprive, and Gush, which all allow us to return a land from the battlefield to our hand, alongside Mystic Sanctuary. So for instance, we could cast Gush, bouncing Mystic Sanctuary and another island to our hand to draw 2 cards, and then we can activate our commander, put Mystic Sanctuary into play, and put the Gush back on top of our deck. And then we could loop that to get consistent card advantage. Deprive is a counter spell that we can loop this way. Now, when we're making infinite mana, we have 3 main ways to do so. We have land untappers that make enough mana to go infinite with Freed from the Real, which allows us to pay a blue to untap the enchanted creature. So if you have a creature that's untapping a land, and that land taps for blue plus 1 more, you can make infinite mana. We also have Galvanic Alchemist, which allows us to untap a creature that it's soul bonded to by paying 2 and a blue. So this effect is more expensive, so it requires a land that taps for more mana. However, the soul bond can be really nice, as it doesn't target, and it can change targets if necessary. The next main card we're going to use for infinite mana is Aboro Breeze Color. This card is great for comboing, but it's also good for just attempting to find your combo on your last turn that you have a chance. So sometimes if I have a land that only taps for 4 or 5 mana, which is not enough to actually go infinite, I will just activate Aboro Breeze Color as many times as I can, bouncing all of my lands to my hand to dig with Gretchen, on top of somebody trying to remove my creature or something like that. Additionally, Aboro Breeze Color does not need to have haste to win the game, making infinite mana the turn it comes into play, which is really strong. It also has a special combo with the Stone Cedar Hierophant, which is listed here. This combo doesn't line up too frequently for me, but if you can get it, good for you. And the final way that we are going to look to make infinite mana is with Archaeomancer, who comes into play and returns an instant or sorcery from our graveyard to our hand, alongside Snap, which bounces a creature back to their owner's hands and untaps 2 lands. So if our lands tap for if we have 2 lands that tap for a total of 7 mana, then we can cast Archaeomancer, and then cast Snap to get our Archaeomancer back to our hand, and then cast Archaeomancer to return the Snap to our hand, and loop that. Then once we have infinite mana, we activate Gretchen to draw through our deck. We can use Capsize with Buyback to bounce all of our opponent's permanents back to their hand, even their lands, which at a bare minimum allows us to capsize all of our opponent's boards. We can gain life with a couple spells that gain life in here, and then we can bounce our Archaeomancer back to our hand and repeatedly recast Reclaim to refill our library, And if all of our other win conditions are gone, we can just pass here. And we can repeatedly establish our infinite mana, capsize lands, and anything else our opponents manages to play, and slowly just attack them to death with an Archaeomancer, which is not great, but it is something we can do. We can also draw our opponents out with Compulsive Research via this loop, or if your capsize is gone, you can use this loop here with a Boro Breeze Color, Mystic Sanctuary, and Reclaim, and our commander, Gretchen. And using this loop, we are basically able to put any card from our graveyard on top of our library after you go through these steps. And then you can draw that with Gretchen and cast it and loop through this as many times as you want, being able to cast any spell in your deck as many times as you want. So most commonly this is going to win us the game with Compulsive Research, which allows us to target our opponents and force them to draw cards, and then we just loop through this with all of our counter spells in hand until they draw through their entire deck. This deck also has multiple ways to win on turn 3. For a turn 3 win, typically you are going to need Freed from the Real, and then you'll need a 1-mana enabler like Utopia Sprawl or Arbor Elf, and then you'll need a couple land enchantments. You just play your 1-mana enabler on turn 1, turn 2 you play a land untapper or a land enchantment, and then turn 3 you play Freed from the Real, make infinite green, cast a second land enchantment on that land so you can make infinite blue and green, and then go for your win from there. We've also got some gameplay videos if you want to see some examples. Now, I'll go through and break down some of the card selections for you guys. In terms of our card draw, it's pretty cut and dry. We play a lot of instants and sorceries, so Treasure Cruise is going to be 1 mana a good chunk of the time. Gush and Tragic Lesson we can loop with Mystic Sanctuary, and Compulsive Research is a win condition, as well as a good card draw spell. And we've also got Impulse as just a decent little cantrip. Got a Boro Breeze Color, which is an absurd combo piece, as we mentioned. My list is currently on 9 counter spells, one of which is Deprive. Dispel, you can take it or leave it. This is more so to protect you on your combo turn than anything else, or protect your combo pieces from removal, because people will very often target your land untappers, even if you're not trying to win the game actively at the moment, because they provide so much value for this deck. So I still play Dispel, but you could cut it if you feel you don't need it, same with Negate. But as we are a heavy combo deck, I think it is better to run more counter spells. We've got an Archaeomancer, which is a combo piece, as I mentioned, as well as just a good value creature. We've got a couple pieces of life gain in the deck. One is True Life Gain with Weather the Storm, and the other is Moment's Peace. Moment's Peace can be useful because it can save other people as well, if necessary, or save your creatures that are blocking, whereas Weather the Storm just gains you life, but it can do a lot more life gain than Moment's Peace. If your meta is very combo-centric, and there aren't really any combat decks, feel free to cut these. I've had games where I try to win on turn 3 to 5, and then somebody will interact with me repeatedly on that turn, and I'll just end the turn with Weather the Storm with like 6 or 7 copies on the stack, and that'll help get you through so you can survive long enough to go for another combo attempt, which is nice. Strider Harness is a piece that was added fairly recently, I personally really value the haste from Strider's Harness. Not to mention this has an equipped cost of 1, so even if you have a land that taps for 2 mana, this can, after you've put it into play, this can almost be a form of a mana ramp ritual kind of thing, where if you have 2 land untappers in your hand, you can play them, equip to one of them, tap to untap your land, and then use some of that mana to move your Strider's Harness to the other land untapper and untap that land again, which I've done a couple times and is always very funny. We've got some protection, instant speed, very important. People will try to kill your land untappers, and they are almost always required unless you have a Borrow Breeze color. And Tamiya Safekeeping providing life gain is nice. Avoid Fate is probably the worst of these if you're wanting to cut one. Finds of Vastwood can target other creatures that your opponents control and prevent them from targeting them as well. So this can also be a piece of interaction against opponents' combos. And then when you get to the ramp package, we have many pieces of ramp, because that's what this deck is all about. We've got a bunch of land enchantments. We've got Farseek, and Spoils of Victory, which can tutor for our Mystic Sanctuary or our dual lands. We've got land untappers. And we've got High Tide, which can make our islands tap for more for some of our combo lines. But this is all pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty hard to cut most of these, although I am playtesting list without the Task Mage right now. Reclaim is instant speed recursion, which can help save us from Grave Hate during our Mystic Sanctuary loops, and is also part of our win condition to restack our deck. I think it is very viable to play another Reclaim effect, although the only other 1-mana version is Sorcery Speed, I believe. We've got a few pieces of removal. We don't do much interaction in this list because we're pretty heavy on counter spells and just drawing cards, but we do play a few, and these are all very powerful. These two are also combo pieces. And then we have our suite of tutors, which we have plenty of. We have some tutors for lands, which we use to search for Mystic Sanctuary, because as I've stated, it's very strong in this list. We've got Dizzy Spell, which can tutor for 1-drops, so it can tutor for removal, recursion, land enchantments or untappers, protection, counter spells with Dispel. It's a pretty versatile card. Or we can use it to tutor for a crop rotation or something. We've got Wizard Cycling to go find our combo pieces, like Archaeomancer or the Galvanic Alchemist. Or we even have a Wizard Land Untapper. We've got 2 of them. We've got some Transmute cards as well to go find whatever you need. And Trinket Mage to go find your Aether Spellbomb. This card could potentially be cut, but it gets Expedition Map to find Mystic Sanctuary, or it gets Aether Spellbomb. And then the mana base is very simple. We want our lands to tap for both colors if necessary, as much as possible. So we've got Command Tower, Path of Ancestry, and 3 dual lands. Simic Growth Chamber can be used to bounce our Mystic Sanctuary. These are forest and islands, which means they're very strong for our land untapping loops. Because if we have a land enchantment on it that allows it to only tap for extra green mana, it can still be tapped for blue in those loops. And then we've got slightly leaning towards islands. which, as we can see, our mana symbols are slightly leaning that way. But generally, you're not going to be hurting for colors. And then we've got our untappers for our creatures, which essentially help us untap our lands. So yeah, in general, this deck is just looking to accrue value. With our commander, over time, we can go for a combo as early as turn 3 if we get a great hand. Typically, we're going to be trying to end the game somewhere around turn 7, but you can also choose to take this deck slow and just keep activating Gretchen if you so choose. So now we're just going to talk about some potential opening hands that the deck could have, and whether or not I think these are something I would keep. So this first opening hand is not something I would keep, especially if this was my first 7. We've got a land enchantment that costs 4, which is a bit slow. We have a really strong land untapper, but he also costs 4. We've got a piece of protection that we don't have much to protect, and 1 piece of interaction. So we're not really going to do anything. Turn 1. Turn 2, we could bounce something, but we're probably just casting Gretchen. And then turn 3, yeah, we're just existing. So this isn't a very active hand, so I would not keep it. If we go to our second 7, we can see this hand is a bit more keepable, in my opinion. We're still not doing anything turn 1, but we do get a Path of Ancestry down, which allows us to scry on turn 2 with our commander, as well as on turn 3 with the Krosan Restorer. So with this hand we get 2 scries by turn 3, as well as our 3 draws. And we have 2 land untappers and a cantripping counterspell, which are all very strong. So I think this is keepable as your second 7, even though it's not great. So even if we kept it, our play would look something like get another counterspell, cast Gretchen, scry a card, which is Gush. Gush you could keep or put to the bottom, but let's just assume we keep it on top. And then turn 3 you get another scry, put that to the bottom. And here we are on turn 4 with a land untapper, Gretchen, 4 lands. We've got a bounce spell, we've got a draw spell, we've got 2 counter spells that we can choose to hold up. We could cast another Dryad, or we could just pass the turn and hold up mana for our interaction and a Gretchen activation, putting this land into play, getting a land for next turn, and yeah, we're just gas from here. Looking at another test hand, this would be a new game, so if this was my first 7, I would probably not keep it. The lands, so having a bunch of lands is not awful with Gretchen. Here, once again, we have turn 2 Gretchen, turn 3 land ramper, and then turn 4 we're just kind of going. So this hand isn't horrendous, but as my first 7, I would probably not keep this and be a bit more greedy. Try to find a 2 mana land untapper, 2 or less land untapper or land enchantment. This hand on a second 7 is very risky. So obviously we have 2 1-mana land enchantments, which is amazing, but we only drew islands. So if you choose to keep this and you draw a forest, which we did not, if you were to draw forest here, the game is probably yours. But if you don't, like we did, we would go island, island, and then we're just sitting here. So you probably shouldn't keep that unless you think the table is going to be extremely fast. So if we went to our 6, this hand once again is pretty slow, but we are down to 6, so I would probably end up keeping this hand. And depending on the table, you decide if you don't need the protection. You could also just pitch a land here. Muddle the Mixture is probably good to keep, but you only have one source of blue at the moment, so you could pitch that, and you're definitely keeping the Verdant Haven here. So hopefully that was a good overview of my list. If you have any questions, absolutely leave them in the comments below, or pop over to the deck list, which I will leave in the description below, and leave a comment on the deck itself. Hopefully you all enjoyed that deck tech overview, and I'll see you all next time.